Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our Tuesday class where we study or we read from Uddhava Gita, and we are on chapter 12. And we've been learning about the Varnashrama Dharma. And this is the conversation between Lord Krishna and Uddhava. Uddhava was Lord Krishna's cousin also. In fact, he looked like Lord Krishna too. The gopis were surprised. They really thought that Krishna came, but actually it was Uddhava. Okay? And he was Lord Krishna's disciple also. And that's why Lord Krishna is, before he departed this earth, he was giving these instructions to him. So let's do the prayers first. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhur Bhavaswaha, Tat Savitra Varenyam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, Astoma Satgamya, Tamsoma Jyotirgamya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamya, Om Sena Bhavtu, Sena Bhunaktu, Saviryam Karvavai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidveshavahe, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let's open our books on page number 383, and it's chapter 12. And this is towards the end of this chapter. So verse number 45. Bhaktiho udvan payaniha sarvalok maheshwaram sarvoho utpatte apyayam brahmkarnam mopayatis. My dear Uddhava, I am the Supreme Lord of all creation, and I create and destroy this universe, being its ultimate cause. I am the absolute truth, and one who worships me with unfailing devotional service comes to me. Coming to God means attaining the goal of life. The Supreme Lord said, one who worships me in unalloyed devotional service achieves my shelter. I am the ultimate cause of all the universe. My pure devotee achieves the liberation known as Sharishti, whereby he achieves opulence like mine. However, one who worships my impersonal feature attains Sayujya Mukti, the liberation of merging into my effulgence of Brahma. And we are all familiar with different levels of Mukti. Sayujya Mukti is one stage. The Supreme Lord is the ultimate cause of this material world's creation, maintenance, and destruction. He is the supreme object of knowledge. By worshipping him by means of unalloyed devotional service, one attains his shelter. Number 46. Iti swadharam nirikt satvaho nirgyat madgati gyan vigyan sampannunah chirat sam upati mama. One who has purified himself by the performance of his prescribed duties. Okay, we purify ourselves by doing our duties. But learning how to do the duties, if we are doing the duties with certain results in our mind, we are not purifying our mind. Who understands my supreme position and who has attained theoretical and practical knowledge will soon come to me. So we need to know the theory first before we can practice it. Knowledge is needed. In this verse, the Lord concludes his instructions. If one cultivates a knowledge of his relationship with the Supreme Lord while executing his occupational duties and remaining aloof from bad association, he will gradually rise to the platform of pure goodness and thus receive the treasure of unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. This is the life's ultimate goal. Varnashram Vatam Dharm Esh Achar Lakshanaha Sa Ev Mad Bhakti Yutoho Nishreyasaha Karapara. Those who are followers of this Varnashram system accept religious principles according to authorized traditions that govern proper conduct. When such religious duties are dedicated to me in loving service, they award one the supreme perfection of life. After describing Pradhane Bhut Bhakti, the Lord herein talks about Guni Bhutah Bhakti. The Supreme Lord said, if the duties entrusted to the followers of the Varnashrama system are dovetailed in my devotional service, they award one the supreme perfection of life. The path of renunciation entails giving up all varieties of sense gratification. And so it is very difficult for ordinary people to perform. Those who are engaged in the devotional service of the Lord under proper guidance automatically achieve the result of renunciation because all of their activities are offered at the lotus feet of the Lord. Okay? So this is the easy way, just going through our Varnashrama, but offering the results to God. Thus, it should be understood that unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Lord is the ultimate fruit of engaging in the occupational and religious duties prescribed within the Varna Ashram system. The last verse of this chapter, Etat te bhihitam sadhu bhavan prichatihi yacha mam yatha swadharam sanyukto bhakto mam samiyat param. My dear Uddhav, I have thus answered your question as you had asked me about how a devotee perfectly following his occupational duties can attain me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so this was the question asked by Uddhav, and that's what Lord Krishna explained. So doing your duties, how to do the duties, how to stay in the surrendered state of mind. So I would encourage that go back because this is very important. We are all householders and we have certain duties, but while doing the duties, how can we attain that ultimate goal of life? Next chapter, chapter number 13, the perfection of spiritual knowledge. Let's look at the summary first. This chapter describes how the Gyanis eventually give up their method of acquiring knowledge, whereas the pure devotees remain engaged in devotional service eternally. Also described in this chapter are the different practices of the yogis, beginning with the yama. And we are all yoga students and we understand this terminology, yam and the niyam. The Supreme Lord Shri Krishna said to Uddhava, one who is actually wise, who knows the science of the self and is endowed with spiritual insight, rejects this material world of dualities and the so-called knowledge that facilitates enjoying it. He instead engages himself in trying to satisfy the Supreme Lord, the Master of all. So any actions we do, we should always keep in mind, is God getting happy with that or not? Happiness of God. This is called pure devotional service. Transcendental knowledge is superior to ordinary pious activities, such as the chanting of mantras. But pure devotional service is even superior to the cultivation of transcendental knowledge. After this, when Shri Krishna was asked by Uddhava to explain in detail the processes of acquiring transcendental knowledge and devotional service, the Lord related the same instructions that the greatest of the Vaishnav, Bhishma Dev, have imparted to Maharaj Yudhishthir after the battle of Kurukshetra. And we are familiar with this name, Yudhishthir, the oldest of the Pandavas, and Bhishma, the younger brother. Following this, after being asked about yam and other practices of yoga, the Lord described the 12 kinds of yam, beginning with non-violence, and 12 types of niyam, beginning with cleanliness. Okay. So let's look at the first verse. What is Lord Krishna saying? Yo vidya shrut sampannaha atamvan nanumanikaha maya matram idam gyatva jnanam cha mai sanyaset. The Supreme Lord said, one who has cultivated knowledge of the self up to the point of realization of his eternity, and who has given up speculative knowledge, understanding the material universe to be a temporary, illusory manifestation, should no longer endeavor to cultivate knowledge by speculative means. This chapter describes renunciation as prescribed by the Gyanis and the eternal devotional service that is practiced by the pure devotees, as well as the practices of the yogis, beginning with Yama and Niyam. A conditioned soul must somehow free himself of his illusory existence, which has entrapped him since time immemorial. One means for accomplishing this is the practice of the Eightfold Yoga system after renouncing all material desires. By this difficult process, one can gradually lift himself above the darkness of ignorance. However, when one is actually situated on the transcendental platform, there is no more need to cultivate spiritual knowledge for the purpose of dispelling his material entanglement. For example, a man haunted by a ghost may take help from mantras, herbs, and other such remedial measures. However, when he is no longer possessed by the ghost, all such things have no practical value for him. Here, the word vidya refers to knowledge acquired by philosophical speculation, mystic yoga practice, austerities, and so on. Such knowledge of the illusory nature of material existence certainly dispels ignorance, and there are many Vedic scriptures that impart such knowledge. After one gives up his false identification with the material body and mind, one must further advance by engaging in the loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one becomes advanced in Krishna consciousness, there is no more need to dispel illusion. The scriptures recommend that one adopt the processes of karma, gyan, and bhakti as a means to attain the ultimate goal of life. The living entity's conditional state is due to their material conception of life. When the conditioned souls are under the influence of the three modes of material nature, they are filled with mundane conceptions and puffed up because of the false ego. Three modes are the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Because of false ego, the conditioned souls think themselves to be the enjoyers of this temporary material world. When facing competition, they attempt to defeat their opponents so that they can maintain their attempts to indulge in temporary and insignificant material enjoyment. So, in this Maya, whenever there is an absence of knowledge of self realization, a conditioned soul being under the control of false ego, see, conditioned soul, what is the term, Sanskrit term for it? Jivatma, conditioned soul. Under the control of false ego and devoid of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, yearns for liberation. However, such desires for liberation are another manifestation of a false ego. When one's knowledge of self realization is directed to the service of the Supreme Lord, so that one is actively engaged in the service of the Lord, that is the perfection of Karam and Gyan. Okay? So, Karam Yoga also takes us towards God, and Gyan Yoga also. Okay? So, both of them, if they are increasing our love for God, we are on the yogic path. A living entity that has fallen from the constitutional position is naturally covered by conceptions of Karam and Gyan. The ignorance that is the result of the misuse of one's minute independence. See, minute independence. It's a beautifully way it's said because we think we are independent. We have the freedom, but minutely. Okay. Where the God is completely independent. Coupled with the duties coupled with the desire to lord it over material nature, leads one to attempt to bring the Supreme Lord under one's control. Such an illusion created by perverted knowledge induces the conditional soul to think that he is the enjoyer of all that he serves. Due to the absence of devotional service, such a person thinks himself to be non different from the Supreme Lord and thus readily accepts the philosophy of Mayavad. When under the shelter of Mayavad philosophy, a living entity falls into the various inauspicious situations because of his ignorance of spiritual variegatedness. Although appearing to be engaged at the transcendentalist, such a person's material conception of life is evident because he sees everything in a spirit of enjoyment and thus utilizes his senses for personal sense gratification. So, all of this, God has given it to us to love Him more, but we become selfish and we want our own personal sense gratification, and that is the ignorance. A self-realized soul who has crossed the boundary of inauspiciousness is not attracted to cultivating knowledge by direct perception or hypothesis, which are the domain of mundane philosophers. He is liberated from the darkness of ignorance, has graduated to the platform of pure devotional service by accepting a spiritual master in disciplic succession. Such a self-realized soul gives up the impersonal Brahm conception of the absolute truth as well as all desires for fruitive activities. Fruitive activities, that means sakam karam. And thus remains fixed in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. He directs all of his activities and whatever knowledge he possesses to the service of the Supreme Lord. The result is that he attains the blissful state of eternal existence. So we all want to be blissful, but if we stay selfish, self-centered, we cannot be blissful. This is the way to stay blissful. Being situated in his eternal constitutional duty of loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Beautifully explained. Verse number 2 of this chapter, Jnaninas to aham aveshtaha swartho hetuscha samtaha swargas cha eva apvargas cha nanyo